I know Corey said they're bringing.
No, right there.
Oh, they already brought it.
Yep, they're ready to roll.
Okay.
Well, I've been here 36 years. How are you?
Yep.
My first one was a teenage Mary. The second one was a car. Remember David? I had my sister. The longest, 36 years. My what? I've already kind of shifted to no, I am the oldest. Well, our generation now, we're going to start making our arrangements. The last generation, everybody's going to pay attention.
Oh, and your sister
They're all
is
gone.
Sam. She was tall. I remember when it was when we got married and you guys put flowers and put stuff all like that. My put flowers.
Hi, how are you?
Good day.
Raise it! Out!
On behalf of the President of the United States Air Force, and a grateful nation, please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your loved one's honorable and faithful service to this country.
Harder! Harder! Dismiss.
Welcome everyone. My name is Stan Astronakis. I was Fred's brother-in-law. I'm Esther's husband, almost 43 years now. Fred Sanchez Munoz was born on October 24th, 1956 to Federico and Rosalina Munoz. They're here with us today, not too far from where you're standing. He was the fifth child in a family of 8. He loved his sports, basketball, baseball, boxing, but his heart was always with the LA Rams. He loved the Rams. Since he was a child, Fred had a lifelong commitment to the Rams. Everyone in the family was so happy that before his life ended, he watched the Rams win their most recent Super Bowl. Fred's first job, like so many in the Valley, was working in the grapevines in the summertime. He loved all kinds of music. And De Colores was one of his favorite songs because he marched with Cesar Chavez when Cesar came to Coachella. After high school, he enlisted in the Air Force. This was during the Vietnam era. His assigned home base was Florida, but he also was stationed in Guam and Korea. He came home after being honorably discharged to the Coachella Valley. He was a lover of the desert. He enjoyed watching the wildlife and nourishing it as much as possible. He was a hard worker. He was a sincere, honest person who had a deep commitment to his family. He also had a nurturing streak. Abandoned animals who found their way to the ranch were taken into the fold. He gave them affection and a home for life. He always had dogs, cats running around all over the place. He enfolded people with his personality. People who dropped by with friends came away with a sense of admiration for the sometimes gruff man who could instill cheerfulness. But his nurturing side came forward most in the caring for his parents. He nursed both his father and mother till the end, giving up so much of his time to do so. They both passed in 1994. It was a very tough year. He liked to tinker and do carpentry. He had a natural handyman's talent. He also enjoyed fixing up vintage cars with his brother Moises. Fred loved gardening and fought with the heat all the time to grow plants. He was especially proud of having planted so many date palms. Fred adored his only son, Anthony, and he had a deep affection for Anthony's wife, Amy, and his grandchildren, Penny and Anthony, who are here with us today. Fred was raised to believe in the old values his father, Federico, taught him. A man must be hardworking, honest, and never complain. Un hombre no se queja. And so no one knew how sick he was. Because of COVID, his family did not get to visit as much as they wanted, and no one knew how ill he actually was. So it was a shock when we went to see him, to take him to a clinic, and we realized right away that he had to go straight away to the nearest emergency room. He died less than an hour later. But it was not a total surprise. His sister, Maria Esther, tells that a week before Fred died, his son Anthony called her. During that conversation, he told her of a dream. In the dream, Fred and Anthony sat side by side. "I'm going to miss you, Dad," Anthony told Fred. "I'm going to miss you too, Miko," Fred told him. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, son." So although at the end Anthony was not at his father's bedside, his son was able to say his final goodbye to his father. For those of you who have not had a chance to meet him, Anthony Munoz. And if I may say personally, no one could have a finer legacy in this life than ever get someone like Anthony.
Wow. Man, there's a lot more people than I thought there would be here today. My dad would have hated it. He didn't like large crowds, but he loved people. Especially, I think he loved to make people laugh. Over the past few weeks, I've gotten to speak with a lot of you and a lot of people who have called me. And there were two themes that ran through it. One was that he cared deeply for them, or at least that's what they felt, and that he made them laugh all the time, which I think is probably going to be his legacy, is that he was very funny. And everyone who went to the ranch, as Estelio said, loved to be around my dad. I would always get text messages and calls from people, and they would tell me the insane things that he would say and do. Most of them probably inappropriate to say today. You know, we talked often on the phone, and it was always funny. A few weeks before he passed, although he may have been ill, he still had his humor. I told him that Amy and I were taking some kids to church, and he said, "Church? People don't go to church anymore." And I said, "Yeah, you're probably right." I said, they'll go back and they have nothing left. And he goes, "Yeah." And then God's going to tell him, "Too late, perverts." And I laughed and I laughed and I laughed. He loved making people laugh. But beyond that, I think he loved people. My dad's friends would always take me aside when I was younger, and they would make a point to tell me that he was a good man, and that he would give the shirt off his back to anyone, and he would help anybody in need. Every single one of his friends. I can only hope that that is a legacy that I can continue. I seen him once. We were driving down the road, and it was probably a homeless man walking on the side of the road. He crumpled up a $20 bill and he threw it out the window at this gentleman. Well, the gentleman thought my dad was throwing trash at him, so he threw his hands up in the air as if my dad was being cruel. My dad seen it and he backed up. Well, the wind had taken the $20 bill and blew it into the bushes. And for the next 15 minutes, my dad and this man looked for this money as my dad was complaining that he just threw $20, the last of his 20, out the door. But that's who he was, you know. When he had passed, I came back to organize his things, and there were two thoughts that kept going through my head. Number one was that he was more religious than I thought he was, which is unfortunate because I would have loved to have spoken about these things to him. He had Bibles in all the corners of the house, it seemed, and religious artifacts strewn across it, books about Christianity. For instance, he had this piece of slate about this big, and he had very unique penmanship. It was always capitalized, and if you go to the ranch, you'll see all the signs, and all the penmanship is the same. I remember he wrote A&F Trucking, Indio, California, which I seen yesterday, And it was the exact same penmanship. And I remember when we were there when he did it. Or I was there with just me and him on the ranch like it was. So touching. But he had written on this piece of slate, he wrote St. Francis of Assisi is what he wrote, which is pretty important because St. Francis he lived in poverty, which my dad did. But he's also the patron saint of animals and the environment. What can be more fitting than that? I just don't know why he wrote it, and we'll never have the answers to it. But that slate says it all, doesn't it? Number 2, though, was that he didn't have a lot in life. He didn't care about the things we cared about. He didn't care about the latest phones or nice cars or all these things. He cared about the things that were important. And the thing that kept going through my head as I was there organizing things was a Bible verse. And I want to read it to you now, and then we'll just talk about it briefly. In the book of Matthew, which is essentially just a book of the things that Jesus said and did, he said this, and this is Matthew 6:19. Do not lay up for yourselves, or some translations say, do not store up for yourself. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, where neither thieves break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. What a fitting passage for my dad, because he didn't store up anything for himself on this earth, and the things that he did, thieves broke in and stole. But I don't think he would have minded. Again, he gave most things that he had to people. I would send him food, and then my sister would tell me that she went to pick it up because he said to come pick it up. I took him to Costco one time to buy him a bunch of food because I think we all cared about him being nourished, and he said, let's go to the animal section first. And so we went and put 2 giant bags of dog food and a bunch of cat food, and I said, well, let's go get you food. And he said, no. I said, yes. He goes, no, I'm not leaving the store with my own food. We just bought the animal food and left. We weren't religious growing up. We never went to church. We didn't listen to religious songs. Apart from maybe The Devil Went Down to Georgia, I think. But my earliest memories, from as early as I could remember, he told me to fold my hands, shut my eyes, and repeat after him. And he had me memorize the Lord's Prayer, Our Father who art in heaven. And from what I can remember, until probably 11 or 12 years old, I said that prayer every single night without question before I went to sleep. We never spoke about any other religious things except for that passage and maybe the expletives that he would use. And so as we're talking about treasures in heaven and not on earth, I think that although he didn't have treasures on earth, I think that when he gets to heaven, and I'm there, and my family is there, and many of us around us, that the impact that he had on us are the true treasures that he had. You know, Victor Hugo was a 19th century writer. He wrote plays and a lot of other things. He wrote The Hunchback of Notre Dame. He had this to say towards the end of his life. I feel in myself the future life. I am like a forest which has been more than once cut down. The new shoots are stronger and livelier than ever. I am rising, I know, towards the sky. The sunshine is on my head, the earth gives me generous sap, but heaven lights me with the reflection of unknown worlds. You say that the soil is nothing but the result of bodily powers. Why then is my soul the more luminous when my body powers begin to fail? Winter is on my head, but eternal spring is in my heart. I breathe at this last hour the fragrance of lilacs, the violets, the roses at 20 years. The nearer I approach the end, the plainer I hear around me the immortal symphonies of the worlds which invite me. It is marvelous, yet simple. It is a fairy tale, yet it is history. He goes on to say, when I go down to the grave, I can say, like so many others, I have finished my day's work, but I cannot say I have finished my life. My day's work will begin again the next morning. The tomb is not a blind alley. My dad would have thought that was funny. My day's work will begin the next morning. The tomb is not a blind alley. It is a thoroughfare. It closes in the twilight to open with the dawn. What Victor Hugo is saying is this is not the end for my dad. He loved to plant trees. And I hope and I pray that when I get to heaven, that many of us are there in a date orchard, surrounded by my wife and my kids and many generations and my grandparents. And we're all laughing because of something my dad said as he goes to plant new date trees. I think it only fitting that we finish with the Lord's Prayer. You don't have to say it, but I encourage you to do so. Let's bow our heads. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. I appreciate you coming. At 11 o'clock, we'll have a reception. Thank you.